everyone. My name is Padmini Nidumolu, and I'm the co-founder of Lean and Agile, an organization that was founded to bring women in lean and agile organizations and spaces together so we can support each other and we can raise the floor for each other. And this is for the community, by the community. And the more we expand our networks, the more supportive we can be for each other. And as part of this initiative, we have launched another initiative under this umbrella called Lean and Agile 100 or LIA100, where we intend to bring 100 amazing women across the world, across the cultures, to this platform to share their stories, to bring their challenges, triumphs, trials, and how they have overcome them. And the intent is if their story can inspire at least one person out there, our efforts are still very well worth it. That's the intent here. And as part of this series, today we have none other than my favorite, somebody who I really look up to sincerely, Sally Elatta. Hi, Sally.
Thank you so much, Padmini. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here on your podcast. I love it. Thank you for inviting me.
Likewise, we are so honored to have you. I'll do a brief introduction for you and then we'll get talking. So, Sally is simply a transformer. And I loved it when I read this about her because that's how I see her, and that's how people around her see her as. And she's someone who is passionate about helping teams and organizations do what they do even better. She loves seeing the aha moments when individuals, teams, leaders begin to realize how much more potential they can unlock once they understand why work isn't flowing the right way and keep an open mind to the cultural and personal change needed for their own success. Sally comes from a technical background, and she, being a software engineer and architect, um, she's in total love with seeing enterprise level transformations succeed with technology teams and beyond. She loves strategy and strategizing with executives who have the vision, passion, and courage to make real transformations happen. And she truly, truly leads with love. Sally is originally from Sudan. She's bilingual and she has three amazing young children that she can barely keep up with. I can relate to that. I have two, but I
Oh,
can relate to the keeping up. So, welcome again, Sally. So glad to have you here. And while I was reading your bio again, right, I have known you for a while, and I have trained under you, and you've been my mentor as well. I always wondered, right? And I want to start this conversation with that question, which most women have. How do you balance such a demanding and sometimes ruthless demands of the profession and your personal life with three kids and a family, and you're a mom? There's always the tug of war, I'm sure. How do you keep them in balance?
well, balance is really a very interesting because I don't know if we ever achieve balance. What I will tell you is that I used to say you never really have 100% balance, but you pick your priorities, you pick where you're going to focus. And so in sometimes I'm more intentional that I'm going to be okay traveling and I'm going to be okay focusing a little bit more on work. And unfortunately, sometimes at the expense of the family side, because I'm going to have 1 week away. But I will be honest with you and tell you after COVID, it's the first time that I have paused to say, actually, I do feel like I'm balanced. I really do feel like I'm now able to give equally. But I used to say there's no such thing as balance. You're picking your priorities. But today, because I'm not traveling so much, I am really able to compartmentalize my work during the day. Sometimes I might go until 5:30 or 6 p.m., but I'm still able to have dinner, to cook, to see my children in the middle of the day, especially if they're here home. My mother, I'm very family oriented, and so I built a big house so that my mother and my father could move in with me, and that meant a lot to me because I realized it was emotionally impacting me to feel so guilty all the time that I wasn't seeing them, I wasn't visiting them, often enough, I wasn't calling them. We're from Sudan, we're a very strong family. So we have to stay in contact on a much more regular basis than I would say, normal Americans that have been growing up over here. So I built this house so that my mom and my dad can come live with me, which is giving me a lot of balance. My father did pass away, but my mother's downstairs and I see her every day in the morning and every day after work. So I really think balance now that we're not traveling is much more available. And I think we now need to be intentional about cutting off work and saying, look, these specific things that we're doing are sacred. The family time, the movie night, the having dinner together, the spending some time during lunch with my husband upstairs, chit-chatting with him. Those things are important. I used to not work out, Padmini, but now I work out in the morning because I have time to do it. So I'm at least getting 30
Okay.
minutes.
Yes.
My treadmill is right here in the room. So I have like a little foldable treadmill. So I found new ways to exercise, take care of myself. I'm on keto now. And I've never had that before. And I honestly would say that it's very much because COVID put a pause on my very hectic travel schedule.
Yeah. And I think it also gave us time to reflect,
Mhm.
right, on the life that we have led, good and bad, right? And I'm so much
Absolutely.
with you on that. I think we've all had such hectic, crazy running race lives that this time actually gave us some time to sit down and reflect and be empathetic for those who lost a lot as well
Oh, for
last year,
sure.
right?
For sure. You're
Yeah.
pausing and you're taking every single thing. You're not taking anything for granted. You're appreciating having anything. I mean, we have friends in Texas right now that, their electricity went off and their power and their water, but it makes you pause and realize that just everything that we have, we need to be grateful for and
Yes,
not take for granted.
totally, totally. Yeah. So, I'd like to pivot to how you have built your career, Sally. I know it was a tremendous journey. We talked a little bit about it when we met in person, and you do such great work. I personally use your products, right? And many of the industry experts at organizations, teams use your products, and it's not easy to build those platforms. So, can you tell us a little bit about how you started? And how you really made it possible to really build this business and some of those challenges you might have encountered. I know it's a lot. It's like
I'll
asking you to
summarize.
write a book in a minute, but if you can summarize, I think that'll be fantastic.
I will start the story by just clarifying that it's something I didn't have an aha or realize until later, which is that I grew up with my mother in Scotland. I lived in Edinburgh. And when my mom took me there when I was 4 years old, she raised me to be fearless and to try anything that I wanted to try, and that anything that was my dream I could accomplish. And I'm really starting there because I did not realize the impact. I just thought everybody was raised that way, but I did not realize how many people are held back from their dreams because of their fear and because of their self-doubt and because of their I'm worried about making a mistake or failure, you know what I mean, or because my parents told me I'm not good at that or I'm not good at this. So I want to start there because a lot of what you're going to hear me talk about, my ambition and my drive and my testing, I call it test it, nail it, scale it. So me testing, nailing, and scaling different things came from my mother and her courage and passion, because she wasn't like always raised that way. She came from a very small town, a very small village in Sudan, where women were supposed to stay home. You know what I mean? Just, cook and get a husband. But she went and got her PhD in Scotland. And that's just
That's
how rebellious she was,
incredible.
right? So
Yeah.
she took me with her and basically said, honey, you can do anything you want to do. So I want to start there so that for my audience that are listening, how you raise your children and what you plant in them in terms of seeds at a very early age make a big difference for their entire life. And if you give them, there's a great book called Positive Intelligence. If you plant too many weeds in their heads about self-doubt, judgment, or what would people say, we're not good at this or whatever those things are, you're limiting their ability to grow. So I went into the career being an MIS degree, so Management Information System. I graduated. I knew that I wanted to be in the software world. So I was a software engineer for many years, became a software architect, started training, learned that I'm really good at training and that I love it. And I love seeing those aha moments. And then I speak from the heart. I don't have a problem with complex subjects. I actually love. The more complex the subject is, the more I want to learn it and simplify it. So when Java was new, that's the first thing I jumped on and was able to teach that, and service-oriented architecture and many of these complex topics. Um, and then I was recruited by a company that said, look, we've been watching you grow. We really think that you could be a great vice president of our training and development center. And I said, that's wonderful. Now, that was a very big stretch for me because I was not a VP of anything before I was an architect. And for me to lead a P&L and to do that, that was my first growth. I wanted to kind of doubt myself, but I said, no, I can do this. I can, lead. And that is where you have to learn sales and marketing. And those are things that I didn't do before. I just delivered. I was an architect myself. And I think that was my first shift from being a technical person to having business skills. Now, it was still within technology, but it was like having business skills. Through the journey, I ran into Blue Cross Blue Shield Nebraska, and they allowed me to lead their transformation for many years, like almost 4 or 5 years. They allowed me to stay engaged. And through that journey, they allowed me to work with non-technical departments. And I remember being very afraid of that moment because I was teaching a servant leadership workshop, and I had the VP of claims, and the entire claims manager. And I kept telling myself in my head, oh my gosh, they're going to know that I don't know anything about claims, and they're going to realize that I'm a fraud. And what am I going to do? Just stick to servant leadership, Sally. And I kept doubting because some of us have that implicit, what do they call it?
Imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome. So that was a moment that I had that feeling of, I don't know claims. I'm just a technical person. What am I doing? But that was a breakthrough. That was a breakthrough moment for me. And that made me feel much more comfortable and confident that I actually can resonate well with business leaders. And then slowly, started to work with executives and the rest of the organization. I decided that, the feedback was, we love what you're doing. How can you productize this? How can you show us, after the training is done, what can we keep with us? So almost every product that I've created, Padmini, there was a real business problem. Like, I didn't just sit there and say, hey, I want to invent a product. There was a real business need. There was a real problem. And I searched online to find a solution for it, and I didn't find a solution. So then I decided to create
it.
Yeah. So that's all of the products that we have. So agilevideos.com was the first time that I ventured into product development and building, which we have now 320 videos, but building the first set of videos and being comfortable being on camera and being a producer and being an editor and giving feedback to a team. Again, I was a technical person before, and then I became a trainer. So this brought me into product development and managing teams and being a business person that's investing money into a product. And it was really nice because it took me to the business side of the equation. I had always been on the other side, the consulting side or the delivery, but not being a business leader. Fast forward, Agility Health, the measurement platform, same thing. I was working at Blue Cross, and the question that came from the executive there is, how are we going to measure our teams consistently? How are we going to know what their health is? How are we going to know how they're doing? And I remember telling Susan, I know because I go speak to them. Right. But a lot of the dashboards that you're looking at are not telling you the truth because those are performance metrics, Susan. There's more questions that I'm asking that you're not seeing here. So she's like, well, what would that look like? And I remember there were actually 4 different quadrants. So my point here, regardless of the product, is there's usually a business problem.
Right.
There's a real need. And what you do is your instinct tells you this is not a unique need. This is not just for this one person. This has to be something that other people are also looking for. And that is where that, I call it the dot connector. People say, Sally, you're so strategic, you're naturally strategic. But I tell them, before I have a vision and I develop a strategy, I really start with dot connecting. What are multiple people saying, where you can actually now start to see patterns, that there's a common problem, so that you can then provide a solution for it. And so that's where Agility Health was born. And that's where the Agility Experts platform is being born. It's all problems that I'm really seeing that we define a vision around. And then obviously you use basic product management. You create a vision, you test it, nail it before you scale it. You get a lot of input, a lot of feedback. My last thing I want to say here in the journey, obviously being the CEO of the company right now, and there's about 65 of us. We used to be 120, so we can talk about how hard that was to size. But I want to just leave you guys with the test it, nail it, scale it. I think what sets me apart or what's helped me be successful that I want to give to other people is I take action on the ideas. I don't wait and I don't pause. I'm a very decisive, action oriented person. So the moment that I have a vision, I am not afraid to look for somebody on Upwork or to ask my internal team to prototype it for me. And then I'm not afraid to schedule 10 meetings with different people to give me feedback on the vision. And then I'm not afraid to invest the money to move that vision forward. So I'm saying those words because every single one of those steps, it's easy to be afraid,
Yes.
easy to hold yourself back. It's easy to say, I'm not ready yet. I have to have a perfect plan.
Yeah.
And so one of my keys to success that I hope the ladies out there and the women out there hear is don't be afraid to move forward. You're not going big bang. You're not going to put $50, $100,000 on a big project, but you're going to test it. You know, you're going to get feedback. You're going to see if your idea of what you think is a very valuable thought is commercially viable. You know, is somebody
Yeah.
willing to pay for it? So,
Absolutely. I think you're talking about seizing the opportunity.
yeah.
Right. And I think many of us, and you said the right thing, we wait for it to be perfect. And I think there is a research out there that, women don't apply to as many positions until they check all the boxes and the requirements as opposed to men, right? I think that's what, you're trying to address. And that's fantastic, Sally. And what are some of the, I would say, sticky challenges that you went through? And you probably were not hugely successful and kind of address every part of the challenge, but you would have got through that hump somehow. Can you share with us what those challenges might be? Just the
There
highlights
was,
of what you do.
the highlights was the very first time I went into real estate. I was 17 years old. I bought a house. And when I first came to the United States, and I hired a guy and I was able to get money from my parents and using a credit card. I really wanted to be in real estate. I wanted to flip houses when I was 17, 18 years old. I know it sounds crazy. Um, but they called me in the middle of the night, the cops, and they said that the house was flooding and it was all falling apart. Like the whole house was being flooded.
Mhm.
And I remember that my heart just fell. Like I didn't know what to do. I'm like, oh my gosh, like how could this happen? And I obviously I kept the same contractor and we fixed the house because we got the insurance money, and then it happened again. And the house got vandalized again, like completely vandalized, like everything, carpet, everything. I'm telling you the story because it would have been very natural for me at the time to say, I shouldn't be doing real estate anymore. I don't know what I'm doing. I had actually hired a con artist who is the one that vandalized the house. I didn't check security. I didn't look at references. I just trusted him. Um, but that was my first, people call it failure, but I don't call it failure. I call it my biggest lesson of you dust yourself off and you stand back up again and you try one more time and you try a second time. So that's where I learned that when something doesn't go well in whatever business or whatever you're doing, don't give up. Don't look at it as a failure. You
Right.
just learned a lesson. You paid tuition to learn, so try it again. So that was definitely a challenge, just kind of an early on. And then through the company, I mean, there's been many challenges, but I do want to talk about during COVID, the layoff.
Yeah.
Um, that was very hard on me. I am very much about leading from a place of love, and I care about people deeply. So be bold, be real, and lead with love is my leadership mantra. So cutting the company down almost by half was very difficult because one, it made me realize that I had made some wrong decisions about hiring too fast before it was the right time last year, the year before.
Mhm.
So sitting there as a leader and realizing that you made some potentially not great decisions that are now going to impact people's lives was very difficult. That we predicted that we were going to grow tremendously in 2020, but with COVID hitting and everything, we ended up not growing. And so
Right.
all of that, hiring that we did, we'd had to, revert back again from it.
Sure. Yeah.
So that definitely challenged me, and I had to keep this little thing here in front of me because it was so easy for me to doubt myself. And so I had to keep saying, I have to believe that I can so that it really happens. And I think you have Pat Reed here before. She has a famous quote, which is, you'll see it when you believe it.
Yes. I simply
See it when you
quote
believe
that. Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
You believe. So this is the same thing. She believed she could, so she did.
Hmm.
So it was a very dark moment for me, and I really doubted my leadership. I doubted everything. But then I came to, I have to be able to see what the positive outlook of all of this is, so that I can move the company forward and get out of my little rut there.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sure that's probably the biggest challenge, right? As you shared. But I'm sure you've done this with love, Sally, because
I
I
did.
heard you talking quite a bit about leading with love. And I think that definitely resonates with your employees as well. I was there in person at your office for trainings, so I've seen it firsthand. um, and we talked about balancing professional and personal life. And you mentioned, of course, there is never a perfect balance, right? I think we can be perfect, but I think COVID kind of gave us that opportunity. But tomorrow could be different, right? So what do you think will prepare us for a very uncertain tomorrow? We just don't know how long this is going to continue, what is in store, how organizations will pivot, right? That might impact each of us. So what do you think will prepare us for a very uncertain tomorrow?
I think the first place we need to start is just to learn how to be resilient and have shock control measures. So what I mean by that is, let's just make sure if something big like this happens to us again, and I'm talking about individually
Yeah,
or professionally, that we have shock absorbers, that you have a backup plan, that you financially are stable, that we know how to handle something like this if it happens again. So I would say that's just kind of every company needs to think about resiliency of what are they going to do to make sure that if this happens, that they're not reacting, that they're responding appropriately to it. But I do think that I see this all as an opportunity. And I think that a lot of companies are now going to scale and accelerate digital transformation and innovation.
yeah.
And they're actually going to go faster than where they went before. And I think we as individuals are going to have to upskill and develop our talent and be ready for the future of work even faster than before. Um, I see a lot of opportunities emerging, and I think there'll be more disruption in the market. And I think that some companies that were already on the edge and not innovating fast enough might not make it, but
Right.
there are some companies that are going to come out of this and thrive, right? And actually innovate even faster than before. So innovation, thriving, upskilling ourselves, and thinking of new disruptive models. So, one that I talked to you about is just, on-demand virtual coaching is going to be a thing where
Yeah,
before it was not a thing,
yeah,
right? It's just,
yeah.
no, we wanted you in person. We're not going to, nope,
Yes.
on-demand virtual coaching is going to be the next big disruption in the coaching world, which is why we're building the platform for it. But those are what I'm saying is you got to look at the opportunities, right? You got to look at what's going to be different and what is my space in it and how can I upskill myself to be ready and be part of that journey of thriving in a very competitive market.
That is so beautiful because, and maybe that's why they call you strategist, right? It's not easy to look at disruptions as opportunities and really have that vision into the future. And I love the on demand coaching platform and that whole concept. I think that's the future. It's not going to be a very heavyweight, I'm going to need you here every day, 9 to 5 for next 5 years, but it's what you need, right? I think that's fantastic. And really, that brings me to the next point where and Lean and Agile, right? It's in support of diversity, right? Gender diversity in particular, of course, amongst the other diversities. And as we go through the disruptive markets, disruptive organizations going forward, I know we will need more women in all layers of the organization, not just leadership, right? At all layers. And we recently talked about at a conference the broken rung, where it is hard for the women to jump the first step of the ladder. And then, of course, they move on relatively quickly, but the first rung is very important for them to make the jump. And you talked about, you're not afraid to kind of schedule 10 meetings and get the feedback and get the thoughts from the community, crowdsourcing, right? As we kind of wrap up, what do you think the women can do in terms of really building the support net, that network of people who can support them and raise the floor for them? Because I think many people, many women are afraid to ask, right? There is a last thing they would do, but it is something that they have to do, right? How do you get yourself to do that, Sally? How do you really convince yourself to do that?
Yeah, you really, first of all, networking on LinkedIn is very powerful. And I think it's just really helpful to look for who you're trying to connect with. It could be within the same company that you're trying to, and just send a very gentle, nice message that's very personable. And just say, hey, been following you. Really love what you're doing around XYZ. Maybe there's a recent blog or a post that they've had, and I would really like to. Sorry, my phone is ringing. And I would really like to connect with you to just explore, exchange ideas, or to explore opportunities. So sometimes you don't have to, in the introduction, immediately say, here's what I want.
Right.
But you're trying to have a virtual coffee chat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I really introduced it is, hey,
Yeah.
can we exchange some ideas? I love what you're working and I'm impressed with your background. So that gentle introduction of, I love what you're doing, I'm impressed with your background, would you be open to a virtual coffee chat? I want to chat about XYZ. Is subtle, but you have to do a lot of that to get one or two people to respond. So I think some people also think that the very first person that they're going to ask, if they say no, they take it personally and they take it as a rejection, basically. And
Yeah.
that's not right. Like, you can't take the very first person that told you no and then feel defeated, feel like, well, they don't like me. Like, don't tell yourself stories. Don't tell yourself stories.
I
People are
like
just
that.
busy.
Right.
People are busy. If they don't respond to you, if they don't say yes, people are busy. Do 10 more, do 20 more. It's just a numbers game. Somebody's going to say yes, but don't only focus on two people. Ask for their connection, their network. And if they say no, feel defeated.
Yeah.
So, my biggest thing here is just, let's stop the negative, Nelly. Let's stop doubting ourselves. Let's stop telling ourselves stories that we're not worthy enough, we're not valuable enough, somebody doesn't like us, we're not going to qualify, they don't think. I think that's what's holding us back. And that's why I really recommend that book called The Positive Intelligence book.
Yeah, I'm going to go get that. And I, love that advice that be persistent, right? It might be 2 out of 20 or 200, but I think the outcomes are important, right? Not the numbers. So I
Yeah.
love that. Awesome, Sally. That this has been such a wonderful conversation, truly. And as we wrap up, do you have a message for us, right? It could be anything that you live
I'm
by.
just
That you,
always going to end with, be bold, have bold dreams, be real, be yourself, because people trust you if you're yourself, and lead with love, be authentic, come from a place of heart, because it will reach other people. And so that's my final message.
oh my God, that is so powerful. And this was just a very impactful, great conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your
Thank
very
you.
busy schedule. And
Thank you.
this means a lot to us. Thank you so much. I hope we get to talk very soon.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.